Burn baby burn! Welcome back to the sun-scorched lands of Greece. I hope you all had a lot of fun with the Roman Centurion builds. And today I have the next awesome builds for you. An insane fire damage build and a fire damage over time build. Both dealing insane damage up to 4 million from horseback, up to 15 million when you make an overpower animation cancel. So you get two builds for the price of one, and you can actually decide yourself if you want to hit someone with fire or if you want to slowly burn someone with your fire damage. First of all, we will check out the fire impact build, which has a permanent fire sword, permanent fire arrows, 675 critical damage at 100%, and of course we have armor penetration at 100% health, playing with the very cool Centurion transmog as well. So let's check out the damage values for the impact build, which is of course also my favorite recommendation because it deals the most damage of both of them. With the light attack you will deal up to 1.2 million damage, and with the heavy attack you will deal a whopping 1.7 million damage, and the charged heavy will be over 5 million damage easily. Ring of Chaos 2.3 million, and an overpower animation cancel will be around 15 million damage every time. Of course we also use the big combo, dealing insane hunter damage here with 4.7 with the ghost arrows. Ghost arrows are an insanely good ability, you can really sneak around and kill everyone through the walls. Then we have the devastating shot dealing over 6 million damage, and the predator shot dealing up to 7 to 8 million damage with the fire impact build. That is my recommendation. Of course, if you want to deal more damage over time, then you have to make sure that your enemies actually live after your first attack. And that's a real problem here, because you have to sacrifice a lot of damage to even make use of damage over time. But if you really want to use damage over time to just have fun and burn your enemies like these poor mercenaries here, then I have it all here. This build will also use a permanent fire sword, permanent fire arrows, 525% critical damage at 100% with up to 220% fire damage at 100% health. And if you just want to run around and ignite everybody, I have added 90% melee resistance just in case. All that fire damage comes to a price. We will only deal around 750,000 with a light attack and around 1 million damage with the heavy attacks. And the charged heavy attack will only be around 3 million, slightly above 3 million with that build, and Ring of Chaos will drop to 1.7 million damage. The overpower will only be between 8 and 9 million damage, devastating shot around 4 million damage, and predator shot will drop to 6 million damage. The ghost arrows then will be around 2 million damage. Both of these builds are mainly warrior focused, so you have to use your critical assassination or rush assassination if you want to hit mercenaries with an assassination attack. So even if you lose a lot of damage by using the fire damage over time build, the damage is still so high that everybody will die in your first hit. And then you won't even be able to deal damage over time. So if you're not using it on purpose by running around with a torch or just shooting your enemies in the foot, then it will be much better to just use the fire impact damage build. I will also start the inventory explanation with the fire impact damage build. We have 140,000 warrior damage, 292,000 assassin damage, and thanks to the big combo we will also deal the 140,000 warrior damage when we shoot our arrows. And for the friends of all the numbers who want to understand the calculations, you can find the damage per engraving here and also the calculations down in the description of this video as usual. For our left melee weapon we will use a perfect warrior sword here, for example Hater's Harper, that can be found from the A Friend in Need quest in Attica. It has warrior damage, 50% critical damage, 30% damage with swords, and of course we use the permanent fire damage engraving here because the left weapon will be our stronger weapon. Of course you can also activate it manually by using the ability, but then you won't be able to activate it while riding your horse, it makes a loud noise and so on. So it's really more convenient to have it here permanently on that sword. For the other melee weapon we will use the Atlantean Blade. The Atlantean Blade is a hunter damage weapon, but it has the armor penetration engraving already on it. And that's something we can abuse here, because we want to have a permanent fire sword and a permanent fire arrow. So then we only have that weapon here to place all our legendary engravings. And since we already have armor penetration, we can either use the Fox of Olympus, or what I propose and what's even better, the convert 50% hunter damage bonus to all damage. Because when we use the Atlantean blade anyway and the bighorn bow, we already have 2 items with hunter damage. And the belt here on the right side will also have hunter damage. So in total we get 36.5% plus the 30% damage from abilities and masteries. That will be 66.5% from our hunter damage conversion. And we are still at 100% health when we do it. So 66% while still being at full health is probably much better than using the 100% from Fox of Olympus and being at 25% health. Of course you can also use the Fox of Olympus if you want to, but I rather recommend you to play at full health with that build. Our bow as usual of course is a bighorn bow. It's only a rare item, but it is a bugged item that adds all its 6495 DPS to our left melee weapon. So that's a 1.6 times damage increase, which we get for free when we use that weapon. And it only works with the bighorn bow itself. It doesn't work with any other weapon with the same stats, so you have to get it from the Helix store, but you can use your 200 free Helix credits to get it for free. On the bighorn bow we will engrave our basic arrows become fire arrows, and that triggers a special trick which is really useful, and new players might not know it already, because when you go into your quiver you can actually toggle autocraft for your basic arrows. And when you convert your basic arrows into fire arrows by using that engraving, you will have an unlimited supply of fire arrows and you will never have to craft them again. And that makes that engraving so valuable when you want to play with permanent fire arrows. So really useful, especially in conquest battles and when you use multi-shot. The headgear then is pretty straightforward. We have warrior damage, 20% critical chance while full health, 20% damage with swords and daggers, and 30% damage with swords. So a perfect warrior helmet for sword players with 50% damage with swords. The bracers are as well perfect warrior bracers with warrior damage, 50% critical damage, 100% critical damage while full health, and 10% crit chance. But then we use the belt of the Sphinx, because we still need some additional critical chance which we would normally place on the bow. And that belt fits perfectly into that build. It has hunter damage, which we then can use to convert 50% of that back to our warrior damage, and it has 20% crit chance while full health, and we engrave another 100% critical damage while full health. So we are totally back to our 100% crit chance, and we also get all the hunter damage converted to be warrior damage. It's a really valuable unique item, the only belt which has 20% crit chance at full health, and it can always give you the missing 10% if you need them. On the torso we then have a more traditional approach here, warrior damage, 10% all damage, 50% critical damage, and we engrave another warrior damage on it. The boots will be warrior damage, 100% critical damage, 20% crit chance, and also another warrior damage. You can engrave another warrior damage if you fully upgraded it to 20%, as long as it is not on the second or third position. With the impact build we will then have the stats of 296.5% warrior damage, 136.5 assassin, and 143% hunter damage. We have 110% damage with swords, 100% crit chance, 675% critical damage, and only 60% fire damage. But that's alright, we also get the fire effect that we burn everything, we get the 60% additional damage every time. That is totally okay when we have a permanent fire impact build. The important thing on the impact build is actually that we deal our fire damage every time and that we have permanent fire weapons. That's what the build is all about. However, if you really want to deal damage over time, then now we check out the damage over time build. That variant will have 92,000 warrior damage, 269,000 assassin damage, and thanks to the bighorn bow, of course, we also deal 92,000 warrior damage when we shoot our arrows. So I really try to squeeze out every bit of damage to get as much warrior damage as possible still for this build. When we check out our weapons now, we use the Sword of Action. That one is a special weapon which can be found in the Parthenon in Athens, and it has warrior damage, fire damage and damages swords on it. So instead of the critical damage, we will use two melee weapons which both have 40% fire damage to get our fire damage up high enough to deal enough damage over time. On the left sword, which is the stronger one, we will engrave weapon becomes fire damage. And on the other sword, we will engrave crit chance now affects elemental build up. So that will be another sword with warrior damage, fire damage and damages swords. You only get one Sword of Action actually, so you have to get another sword with these stats from the blacksmith when you do the blacksmith reload. The crit chance now affects elemental build up will use your 100% crit chance and almost ignite every enemy in the game immediately. That's a really valuable engraving, and you can replace every other build up engraving by just using that single legendary engraving. The bow will be unchanged. We will use the basic arrows become fire arrows and use the same trick to toggle autocraft for our basic arrows so that we have an unlimited supply of our fire arrows. But the gear is now completely different. First of all, the headgear will have warrior damage, 20% crit chance while full health, and then we use 40% fire damage and 50% critical damage. So actually we sacrifice 50% damages swords, which I would totally not recommend to do, because that is all the 50,000 warrior damage which we actually lose here. Only from the headgear we lose all the damage. But we get 50% crit damage, which will salvage some of it, and we place 40% fire damage. So just for the sake to get more fire damage, we sacrifice a lot of damage, but actually if you want to use damage over time, then that's the way to go. To add a bit of melee resistance, we will use the stolen Isu bracers here with assassin damage, crit chance, 20% crit chance while full health, and place melee resistance on it. That's also the way how we get the additional crit chance which we are missing on the bow in that variant. The stolen Isu bracers of course can be found in the third episode of Atlantis in one of the later story missions in the fort of Meneseas. It's actually not missable, but make sure that you don't dismantle it. And for the belt, the usual combination Persian Warrior's Waistband, assassin damage, critical damage, 30% melee resistance and 100% critical damage while full health. That item is also a unique item because it's the only belt with 50% critical damage. It can be found on the island of Salamis in one special chest here in the ruined sanctuary of Ajax. On the torso then we have warrior damage, 10% all damage, 50% critical damage, and we engrave 15% all resistances. That way we will get to 90% melee resistance. That's not 100%, of course you can also use the Spartan Javelin, but since the Spartan Javelin has damages bears and no fire damage, you will actually lose another big chunk of warrior damage and even more fire damage if you do so. So the better option to have the most fire damage and the most warrior damage actually is only using up to 90% melee resistance, and after all that's just more a safety measure. Of course you can also simply use the arms, the belt and the torso from the first build to just deal the maximum damage. Then here on the boots we have warrior damage, 20% crit chance and 100% critical damage while full health. And here we don't use 40% fire, instead we use 50% burning rate. With the 50% burning rate we will get our fire ticks much faster, and we will deal more damage than when we simply add a little more to our fire damage. So always use the burning rate engraving on the boots instead of adding more fire damage. That's a very common mistake. With the damage over time variant we will get 198% warrior damage and 118% assassin damage. So that's much lower than the first build because we don't have the damage conversion in it, and we also don't have 50% damages swords in it. That's the reason why I always recommend rather go for more damage, because you will kill your enemies anyway before you see any damage over time. Of course we have 100% crit chance and 525% critical damage. We have 180% fire damage and 90% melee resistance. However, if you want to have 220% fire damage, then you can go to the blacksmith and engrave 40% fire damage on your bighorn bow. That way you sacrifice your auto-crafting fire arrows, but then you will deal 110,000 damage over time with 220% fire damage. That's the maximum feasible for that build variant when you use the bighorn bow. Of course, if you drop the melee resistance, then you could deal a little bit more with more critical damage. No matter which build variant you actually choose, I have made a basic setup here for the abilities and masteries that will cost you no more than 200 ability points. So the 390 are the points I did not use, you only need 200 to make this build. As usual, you should go for 6th Sense to slow down time whenever you are spotted. That will not only increase your hunter damage, it also gives you time to assassinate or to attack your targets with warrior and assassination attacks. You can actually skip the arrow master entirely if you have the automatic fire arrow conversion, then you won't have to spend any points on it. Multi-shot is a very good ability for conquest battles, devastating shot is probably the most common in normal use, and predator shot is the highest damage ability. I prefer to use devastating shot most of the time. If you don't like the other one, then you can of course also skip these and save these points. Archery Master is a mandatory ability, it gives you 40% more headshot and hunter damage, but it also fills your first adrenaline segment. So whenever you run completely out of adrenaline, you will always get your first segment back, that's why it is mandatory. Then you should use 1 point here on Overpower Bowstrike as a bridge to get your ghost arrows. Overpower Bowstrike is bugged and not working with the bighorn bow. Charged heavy attack deals 300% damage with swords, absolutely get it. Then the weapons master, of course, all the passive abilities here that give you bonus crit chance, bonus warrior damage, bonus resistance. Then you should put 1 point here on flaming attacks to unlock the fire mastery. Fire mastery gives you 40% additional fire damage, and when you have weapon becomes fire damage, you only need 1 point on flaming attacks. Overpower attacks, of course, 15 million damage, and then RS Madness, one of the craziest abilities in the game, uses your assassin damage when you make melee attacks. Don't forget that you have to enhance that ability to be RS Madness and not the normal battle cry. You can get RS Madness from the Fields of Elysium first episode of Atlantis DLC. Another really good DLC ability from Legacy of the First Blade is Furioso Bloodline. It refills 4 adrenaline segments when you use it, so really good for just the adrenaline refill. And then Ring of Chaos and Second Wind are of course mandatory in any good build. Even though if you don't play as an assassin, you should always get the Shadow Assassin here in the assassin tree. That also gives you 50% additional critical damage, and that's worth for every playstyle. Then you can go for the Rush Assassination, but it will be probably shy of killing a mercenary or nightmare. So in this build, which is a warrior build, you will have to use critical assassination to make sure that you kill them every time. And also don't forget that Stealth Master will give you 10% additional damage overnight as long as you're out of combat, and that also applies for your warrior and hunter attacks. For the basic 200 points variant, I would propose to use the following masteries. You can go for 12 points on hunter damage because you will also get 50% of that as warrior damage. But if you don't have enough points, you can actually also skip these hunter damage points. What is much more important is that you invest 12 points here on crit chance and also on crit damage. That way you will get 98% crit chance, but of course if you get a little more points, you could also invest these points into crit chance, or you simply invest the points from hunter damage also into crit chance if you want to. In the warrior tab, you should go for 12 points on warrior damage to get 16% additional warrior damage. Then further down we go for 12 points on melee resistance, 12 points on fire damage and 8 points on armor penetration. You can of course skip the armor penetration if you don't have enough points for it, or skip the melee resistance entirely if you don't want to put it in your build. In the Assassin tab, of course, we go for as much damage with swords as possible because that's our biggest damage driver, together with 15 points here on crit chance while full health and 15 points on critical damage while full health. If you then have a couple of points left, you can also go for damage while full health. That will round up your package to have the best spread for around 200 ability points. As you progress and you get more, you should then maximize your crit chance at full health, crit chance and your critical damage and damage with swords. If you have a lot more points, then of course you can max out your hunter damage, crit chance, crit damage, headshot damage. You can also go for a couple of points here on the other hunter abilities and for the adrenaline on headshot kill. You actually don't need the chance to consume special arrows because you will get the toggle autocraft for your fire arrows anyway. Then you should max out your warrior damage, get a bit of health and armor if you can, otherwise you can of course skip that. That would be one of the last options to put your points in actually. But max out your melee resistance, max out fire damage, max out armor penetration and also max out damage restored as health if you can. Then in the Assassin tab you should go for damage whenever time is slowed down. That's a nice little buff. And Assassin damage, damages swords, the crit stuff, damage while full health, a bit of adrenaline here, and also health gained per adrenaline spent, and damage on elites and bosses. If you still have points left, then of course you can maximize your assassin abilities or your rush assassination to improve that, or just invest it on anything you want. I hope you like this build, especially the new impact fire damage build is one of my favorites. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave me a like, and see you next time.